When I was a little girl growing up in the 90s, my parents didn't get babysitters when they stepped out of the house. Instead, we had Cartoon Network, and my absolute favorite show on Cartoon Network was Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Now, this show opened my eyes to the terrible destruction that humans were causing to our beautiful planet. But it also showed me that it was up to us humans to do something about it. Or the adults, anyway. And so I couldn't wait to grow up, be a Planeteer, help save the planet. And Captain Planet's famous refrain, "The power is yours." Well, that became a deeply internalized belief for me. Now, as an adult, I'll admit that my childlike optimism has often been challenged. We have 6 years left to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half, and we are woefully behind. We're also in the midst of a mass extinction event, the sixth in the planet's 4 billion year history, but the first to be caused by human beings. Currently, by the more conservative estimate, we have about 1 million species, 1 million species on the brink of extinction. And we're running out of time to do something about it. Now, I know this all sounds pretty dire, but I'm not here on the stage today to tell you how bad things are. I'm here to tell you how good things could be. You see, I'm a cognitive scientist, and cognitive science is the interdisciplinary study of human cognition, taking insights from a range of different disciplines, including neuroscience, psychology, linguistics, and sociology. This field has given us deep insights into how humans think, feel, make decisions, and interact with others in our social worlds. And from this vantage point, I feel deeply optimistic about our climate future. And I'm here today to share 6 of those reasons with you. All right, let's see a show of hands. Who here in the audience cares that climate change is happening? Okay, it's not just me, it is basically all of you in the room. And that brings me to my first reason for optimism. The climate concerned are the new majority. According to a Yale Center for Climate Change Communication study, 6 out of 10 Americans identify as either climate concerned or alarmed. Now, this is not just young people, it's also older people. It is Democrats as well as Republicans. That is a lot of people. If you do the math, it's about 200 million people just in the US alone. And of course, there's hundreds of millions more of us globally. Imagine what we could accomplish if we could somehow channel this collective concern and turn that into action that actually moves the needle on our climate goals. Now, the second reason I'm optimistic is that people actually want to be part of the solution. In a 2021 Pew Research Center study, where they surveyed participants from 17 industrialized nations across the world, ranging from North America to Europe to Asia, they found that 80% of citizens were willing to shift their behavior at home and at work in response to climate change. And more recently, in a study that just came out in February of this year, in Nature Climate Change, where they surveyed a globally representative sample of 130,000 people from 125 different countries, they found that 69% were willing to contribute 1% of their monthly household income towards climate issues. Just let that sink in. I'm going to wager a guess here. You're probably surprised by just how high that number is. I'll admit that I was surprised too. And that brings me to the second equally striking finding from the study. The very same people who said they were willing to contribute 1% of their income towards climate issues also systematically underestimated how much others would be willing to contribute, by about 26 percentage points on average. You might call this the perception gap of climate action. And the perception gap is a big problem because as humans, our behavior is finely calibrated to our perceptions of how others typically behave. And so when we underestimate others' willingness to act on climate, it actually dampens our own motivation to act. Imagine what it would feel like to walk around the world knowing that most people around you share your same concern and that you're not alone. All right, let's see another show of hands. Who here has made a New Year's resolution this year and by mid-year, so end of June, realized that you have failed to follow through? Maybe if you're like me, you might not even remember what your resolutions were. Well, this is a perfect example of what cognitive scientists call the intention-action gap, which is the mismatch between what we intend to do and what we actually end up doing. Now, it's well documented that the intention-action gap is especially applicable to pro-environmental behaviors. And as humans, we are wired to respond to immediate and visible threats, like the lion in the grass, and less so to abstract and invisible threats, like the slow rise of carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Now, the field of cognitive science gives us deep insights into how humans think, make decisions, feel, communicate, and interact with others in our social worlds. And these insights could be powerful tools to guide us in our response to climate change, and we can leverage them to design human-centered solutions that help us work around our psychological barriers to action. The fourth reason I'm optimistic is that behaviors spread like wildfire. A few years ago, in a suburban neighborhood in California, solar rooftop panels started cropping up everywhere. It turns out that it all started with one family, deeply concerned about climate change, who decided to invest in solar panels. And then they talked to their neighbors about it, about how easy it was to install, how much money and energy they were saving, and how good it felt to be doing something positive for the planet. Pretty soon, another neighbor down the street also installed solar panels. And then another, and then another. In just about 2 years or so, more than half the households in that neighborhood had installed solar panels. In fact, it turns out that the single biggest predictor of whether a homeowner installs solar panels is whether they have a neighbor who's done so. The closer the neighbor, the stronger the effect. And this pattern has been replicated not just elsewhere in the US in states like Connecticut, but also on other continents and other countries, such as the UK, Germany, and Switzerland. What happened in that neighborhood in California is a perfect example of how our behaviors influence that of those around us. Behaviors spread within networks, and this spread isn't linear, it's exponential. And what's characteristic of an exponential pattern of growth is that change will seem slow, almost imperceptible, until suddenly it's everywhere. Now, the fifth reason I'm optimistic is that to nurture is in our nature. As humans, we all possess a powerful innate drive to love, protect, and nurture. It may be the most beautiful facet of being human. Our young require extended periods of caregiving, so evolutionarily, this makes sense. But our capacity for love isn't limited to our biological offspring. It's why people adopt. It's also not limited to our species. It's why we love our pets so much. It's why we respond so powerfully to images of polar bears stranded on melting ice caps. And it probably explains the immense popularity of cute animal videos on Instagram. In fact, our love isn't even limited to sentient creatures. Anyone remember the Tamagotchi? Well, if you're not a millennial like me, the Tamagotchi were the virtual pets that were all the rage among kids in the late 1990s into the early 2000s. Now, these Tamagotchi required constant care and attention, and social scientists were initially puzzled by just how emotionally attached children, and some folks older than children, were getting to these Tamagotchi. In fact, some were so grief-stricken when their Tamagotchi died that they put up pet cemeteries for them. There's one in Cornwall, UK. Scientists now call this phenomenon of getting emotionally attached to virtual creatures the Tamagotchi effect. And I love this story because it reveals something hidden and frankly quite beautiful about our psychology and even our biology. The human instinct to nurture runs so deep that the act of taking care of something, even if it's just a collection of pixels on a screen, can lead to the creation of deep bonds of attachment. Sometimes I have wondered how climate action could be transformed if we could only harness this intrinsic drive that we all share to love, nurture, and protect. If we could extend it to all of the natural world, I bet you it would be far more powerful than guilt or shame could ever be. Now, last but not least, the sixth reason I'm optimistic is that we are part of nature. Today, most of us live in urban environments artificially separated from the natural world. But when we go out into nature, we feel better. And now there's decades of research showing that there are a wide range of health benefits that come with spending time in nature. It lowers our blood pressure, lowers our cortisol, and it strengthens our immune system. The Japanese have a name for this. They call it Shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing. Forest bathing has been medically prescribed in Japan since the 1980s for a range of ailments, including depression. This restorative effect of nature on our physiologies reveals our forgotten intrinsic connection to the natural world. And rediscovering this connection could be a powerful way to engage more deeply in protecting this planet that we share with all life on Earth. Now, I've given you 6 reasons for why I feel deeply optimistic about our climate future, and I hope that I've been able to spread some of my optimism over to you as well. Because here's the thing, our actions really matter. 25 to 30% of the emissions reductions that we still need could come from changes that we make in our households. We have the numbers to make a difference, and you've seen that we have the willingness. We even have the tools. We could use insights from the cognitive sciences to work around our psychological barriers to action, and we can leverage new and ubiquitous technologies such as the smartphone to accelerate the spread of pro-environmental behaviors. We can rediscover our intrinsic connection to nature and lean into our natural capacity for love to protect and restore the delicate balance of life on Earth. So, the next time you question whether you have any power to do something about climate change, I hope you remember that Captain Planet was right all along. The power is yours. The power is all of ours. Thank you.